like no,
Have you
is
ever
it?
eaten really, really small prawns where they've still got the shells on and they've just been deep fried?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like
Just like
that.
that.
Okay. I think I
So
can handle it.
crunching through a shell, it wasn't unpleasant. Would it be my food of choice? You can have a bag of crisps, or as you call them, potato chips, or would you like a bag of, I don't know, chipotle flavored crickets?
I think I would prefer the chipotle flavored crickets over the chocolate covered ones.
I would prefer Chipotle too. And now we're live. What do you know?
I've just come up with a new thing. This is going to be huge. Pixel Pints bar snacks.
There you go.
Yeah.
Things that go with not only your beer but your video games.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be greasy either. It wouldn't be like
No.
potato chips where you get grease on your fingers and then get it on your controller or your keyboard.
Although I'm sure that you could deep fry them and make them greasy if you'd like.
No. Berkough, you're ruining the concept. We created the concept. You're going away from the concept. Do we need to remove you?
No.
And how do you humanely immobilize the crickets before sticking them in an oven with some chipotle seasoning?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Paralyze them using liquids. You know.
What, inject everyone into
Whose job is it to do that?
Berkough, because you're the one that came up with the concept of frying them, which was not our concept. So you can get the bad job.
That's probably how you would most easily cook them, though. Just dump them in some nice sunflower oil, get them out, train them.
Have them hop in the oil, and then just like have them
Feel
hop
little
in the
run.
flour. Hey, they coat themselves. You actually don't even have to do any work. They literally are going to hop everywhere, so they'll just coat everything.
Hello, we are Pixel Pints. We are the only podcast that talks about insects that you can have as a bar snack. Probably.
Bug snacks. I actually played that earlier this week.
Is
I'm
it
not
on?
gonna play Bug Snacks.
Well, that's
It's on Game Pass now.
Is it on
It
Game
is
Pass
on
now?
Game Pass,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I was going to try it on Game Pass with my last week or two with my subscription.
Anyway, sorry to derail that, Keith. You can continue with the intro.
Oh, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. You can find us on social media where there are social stuff with things and pictures and words. Those places are Instagram, where you can find us at Pixel Pints Pod, and the Twitter, where in between the hate speech and Discord. We also have a Discord. If anyone would like to join the Discord, please send Matt a link, because we are in charge of the Discord. And Liam, you just remember that. I can delete your posts. And on Twitter at Pixel_Pints. We archive all our episodes on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/PixelPints. And yes, crickets. I think I'd prefer savoury rather than. I'm not a big chocolate covered savoury type thing.
Yeah.
So chocolate covered pretzels don't do it for me. I'd rather have peanuts or potato chips.
Same. Yeah, very much so.
I mean, I take them in spurts. It's like sometimes I'll have a chocolate craving like that, and then at times I'm like, no, I can't. It's too much chocolate.
You know what my wife got me last week that I didn't think that I was going to like, but actually is really quite tasty?
Okay, calm down. This is only 4 minutes. It's not even 4 minutes into the show. We can't get into this.
It's dried mango covered in chili, like a chili powder with sugar and salt. I was really surprised. Like I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this.
Oh, it's the perfect flavor profile. You got spicy and sweet. You got to balance that, man.
Right, and chewy, and
You got a little bit of kick on powder, and
right. Yeah, you get a little bit of sweat, you know.
Yep. Can snort it up like Johnny Depp on his trial.
Something I've been avoiding. No one.
Well,
needs to
I had to make up for
CT.
Liam not being here talking about the trial, so
He would have tried to get it in there somewhere.
sneak it in there somewhere.
No one really needs to see the public psychosis of 2 Hollywood stars.
1 Hollywood star.
And Johnny Depp.
No, that's the opposite, my friend.
Honestly, I couldn't care less about the whole scenario. Right. If we were to have crickets, we would be having them with drinks.
Right.
I'm not feeling great today, so I'm drinking water.
Yeah, well, it's too early for me, so I don't have any beer. I did go out last night though, and had a couple with my buddy Russ, and I went to this place called Atomic Liquors here in town, and they have a lot of local beers on tap, which is nice, but they also do like cocktails. So Russ isn't really a beer guy, so he does the cocktails, and I was able to get some beer. But yeah, they had a really good. Snake Creek's got this Baltic porter called God of Thunder, and it's I think it's like 11%, and really heavy, really thick. So that was one of the ones that I got last night.
By the way,
surely that came in a thimble.
What was that?
Surely it came in a thimble at 11% ABV.
No, it came in a glass probably about this big, so it's smaller than normal, but
like a sherry glass.
Yeah. Kind of. Yeah.
By the way, the person I was just talking, his name is Berkough. I'm Mitch, and that's
right.
And that's Keith McWomble, the one who's hosting today. You missed a couple things there, my friend. You forgot to introduce who we are.
Oh, no one introduces me, so I just thought can you see that I'm not exactly feeling that?
I know, yeah. So it's that, and then also we archive our episodes on YouTube.com/Pints.
He did mention that.
Did you do the YouTube? Oh, I missed that.
100% did that.
Oh, it must have been opening my can.
He got the social media and the YouTube. Just to introduce who we are.
Smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button. We need more subscribers. If I keep saying it, people will do it, right?
Yep.
No, maybe.
I compel you using the Force to smash that like button and hit that subscribe button, like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Star Wars series.
I liked episode 1. I've only watched episode 1 of the 2 that are available.
Oh yeah, that are available. Yeah, I saw both. Yeah, first one was I think the pacing's not great, but for the most part, like the content in it is good. The second episode's better. Second episode's much better.
Is it the same team that was handling Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett?
Kinda. So Deborah Chow, who directed a few episodes and worked on pieces of The Mandalorian with her episodes, she's doing the whole thing herself. So it's not Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are not producing it at all. So it is just Deborah Chow. And it shows kinda. It does remind you more of the prequels, but I think in a good way. But that's just me. I liked the prequels because it is off the prequels.
I was thinking more just in terms of the like the overall feel and the cinematography and stuff.
If you liked Deborah Chow's episodes on The Mandalorian, you'll like what she's done. It's been keeping the same aesthetic of like a lot of stages, a lot of props, a lot of not CG. There's not very many, like the CG is brought down to a minimum. So like it's kept with that style. It does feel more of an extension of the movies though than you would think. The Mandalorian never felt like the extension of the movies. It felt like its own thing. Yeah. This feels a little more of an extension of the movies, but there's a lot more ties to the films, obviously because of Obi-Wan. So the first sequence I think is really good. I really like the very beginning. I don't know if you liked the very beginning, Keith. Well,
it sets up a lot, and it's quite obvious. If anyone has played Star Wars: Lost Jedi, you'll see where that's going with the third sister.
Yep. Or played. There's a lot of hints of a lot of things, except unfortunately, I can't talk about it because you didn't finish episode 2 yet. So we'll have to talk about it another time. But like something happens in episode 2, which then ruins But I guess that's kind of what Star Wars is the fact that like it is out of order already. So when you see other characters in certain, like we just got the announcement of the new game, Jedi Survivor or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a certain character in there that is no longer alive. And so then you obviously know he's not going to kill that character in the game because that character's still alive in the Star Wars mythos because he has to be alive for a certain show. So like that's the only thing that's the hiccup. But as long as the writing's good leading up to it and it's good everywhere else, then it makes up for it. But that's just the struggle Star Wars has to deal with.
I was going to say, one of the podcasts I listened to earlier this week, they were saying that, I guess, specifically Fallen Order, some of that stuff carries into Obi-Wan. Like they're actually making part of the game canon or whatever.
The game is canon. Sorry, excuse me. The game is canon. And yes, some of the characters, specifically more of the Inquisitors, are a part of, but they were a part of it in Rebels as well. So, which then the rumors is also that, well, that's actually not a rumor, I guess. It's more of, well, it is kind of a rumor, but confirmed by some sources that the Ahsoka show in Star Wars is actually going to feature Rebels characters, including Ezra Miller's.
That would make sense. Yeah, for sure.
So they're going to cast Ezra Miller. No, Ezra Miller. I'm sorry. Ezra? No.
I think it is Ezra, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I'm combining an actor's name and something else, but it's Ezra will be in the Ahsoka show. So and so the Inquisitors and basically the animated show stuff is all canon. So
okay,
I can't believe the entire beer section we talked more about Star Wars than beer.
That's all right.
That's okay. I got Red Bull. It's super early this morning, fellas, so beer's not. This is what happens. You punish me when you do the early morning, but.
And just to say, Evan can't be here because he's just got up for his nap before heading off to a friend's house to watch the Champions League final, Liverpool versus Real Madrid, at 4 a.m.
Wow. That's commitment.
That's dedication.
Wait, but he doesn't dedicate that to our show.
No, because he loves Liverpool more than us.
Yeah. True. Oh, by the way, yes, it is a new chair. So if you're wondering, yes, it's not a brand new one. I got a desk and a desk right there to hold my TV up higher, so now I don't have my foot blocking my television when I lay in my bed. And I got another chair, so.
I actually didn't notice that it was a new chair, but that's cool.
Yeah. The tricky part, though, was the desk is so big. I was going to have it be my main desk because it's a lot, the depth is bigger compared to the one I use right here. But it's not long enough compared to this one because actually this one is a combination of 3 desks separated but holding each other up with great physics skills. So I ended up using that one, but it's longer than what was there before, so I had to take everything apart and put everything back together again, and it was a pain.
That's a fun Saturday afternoon.
In which case
I did that on a weekday.
You should play Unpacking.
I do want to play that game. Well, you know what? We need to play it together and stream it on Pixel Pints on twitch.tv/Pixel Pints.
I'm already on the 3rd location, and my obsessive compulsiveness with tidying is kicking in.
Well, if Mrs. McWomble isn't going to pull you after the show, we should play for an hour on the show.
I have a hard out in 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Oh.
So, without further ado, Matt, would you like to introduce the topic for this week?
Yeah, so the topic for this week is, what is an RPG?
I don't know, Matt. What is an RPG?
I don't know if we've talked about this topic before, but I think it's an interesting one, partially because the last 2 console generations in particular, sort of the definition of what is a role-playing game is sort of been blurred, and a lot of games have taken on sort of like RPG traits. So I was listening to Axe of the Blood God earlier this week, yesterday, and they had a small segment where they were talking about it. And one of their community members had a four criteria system for defining an RPG, which I was like, that is actually really creative. So I was like, well, we can bring it on the show and we can discuss it and we can talk about how different games that we view as RPGs sort of fit into it and stuff. So this is the Axe of the Blood God community sort of definition of what is an RPG. Has to have these four elements. Has to have meaningful character progression for which you gain experience from a variety of activities. Has to have some level of character or party customization, such as equipment, abilities, etc. It has to have a variety of lootable or craftable items. And finally, it has to have an emphasis on conflict resolution that is not based in pure Twitch skills. Your character build or conversation or something like that. So those are the four criteria that they use or are considering.
Sorry, can you explain the last one a little better?
The emphasis on conflict resolution should be based on considerations other than pure player Twitch skills.
What do you mean by Twitch skills?
Like shooter stuff, like or arcade mechanics and things of that nature.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Sorry,
So it's not based solely on your ability to react and move the character or move the ship or whatever.
Gotcha. Here I was thinking of being like how fast you can hit a conversation button. I was like, what? Twitching? Like that?
Well, yeah, if there was a countdown timer that you had to be extremely dexterous to go through the character or conversation options, that might disqualify it.
Well, I can think of a few, but
right.
I can think of an actual RPG that makes you do that.
Well, would you consider something like Telltale's Walking Dead to be,
oh God, no.
Right, it's more of a
that's an adventure game. That's not even close to an RPG.
Right.
So on the flip side of that, then, would Marvel's Avengers be an RPG?
Possibly.
Well, here's the thing. I think it's
other than being an absolute pile of shite. Well, because it could meet all of those criteria.
Yeah. Here's the crazy thing is I slightly disagree with that that definition of what's an RPG because Keith makes a good point. Then like in that case, Marvel's Avengers would be considered an RPG, which it's not. It's an action adventure game. That's an action adventure third person shooter. Oh, not third person shooter, third person action adventure game. Like and it has some RPG elements in it, but it is not an RPG. Like these players you are not making decisions. See, my definition of an RPG is a blank canvas character that you create and build and work your way through a world that your choices matter. Everything is customizable with the character. That includes what they look like, what they weaponize, what they craft, that everything that you customize directly impacts the player's ability to complete the game in aspects of the character.
So you don't consider Japanese RPGs to be RPGs? Because those a lot of times
I don't consider those to be video games. I just block them from my mind.
Well, but I'm just saying that's an RPG. Now Japanese RPG may not actually be an RPG, but Japanese RPG, I think it's its own title that kind of has already created its own. It's like a Castlevania that has already created its own thing, even if it doesn't make sense in the context of everything else of what we define in games. I think it's still fine to call. Did I say Metroidvania?
You said Castlevania.
Oh my God!
So
it's early. It's early. But yeah,
I'd like to piggyback off what Mitch is saying. Is where do you draw the line? So where do you draw the line on this side is RPG, this side is games with RPG elements, and then there's another line, which is these are games that should not have RPG elements in, but are shoehorned in for whatever reason.
Yeah, so
on that side, I'd put Marvel's The Avengers.
My own personal litmus test is, I guess, Call of Duty, because the multiplayer progression in specifically like the Modern Warfare games that were on the 360 PS3 generation have like very heavy RPG elements, but it is distinctly not an RPG game, right?
And that's fine. But like we got
no, but yeah, so like in my own personal head, that's sort of kind of where I think of the line being.
Mitch?
Yes.
Do you have a view on where you would draw? Where do you draw your line?
Where do I draw my line? If it doesn't meet that exact criteria, I don't consider it an RPG. Like those are the RPG, I think, is its own category. Yes, can you take elements of an RPG and put it in a game, but that doesn't make it an RPG. An RPG has to have all the requirements, in my mind, to be considered an RPG. What is an RPG? I can tell you right now. Fallout is an RPG. Elder Scrolls is an RPG. What else is an RPG in my brain? What was that game? Outer Worlds is an RPG. I honestly don't. Also, probably a requirement. The game has to be in first person, because I don't know. I can't think of an RPG that isn't first person.
Mass Effect, Dragon Age.
Now I would push.
The original Fallouts were isometric.
Yeah, it was isometric.
Weird West isometric RPG.
Now I would push back and say I would say. I almost want to say Mass Effect near the end doesn't count as an RPG.
How dare you?
It actually transforms more into an action adventure game with choices.
So they did cut back on like the heavy stat stuff, but they started that in 2. So 2 and 3 are relatively the same. 3 just has better shooting mechanics, I think.
Like they could have improved the shooting from 1 and kept everything else, and I think it would have still been, in my mind, an RPG. But yes, you are correct. So, you named some that are third person. Most of the time I think of first person, because they usually want to put the I guess the most mindset, sorry to interrupt you, but the mindset of what is put in there, in my mind, is that you are putting yourself into the character, and therefore that's why mostly I say first person, is because they don't want you to view the character, because that's seeing another person through your eyes. You want to be the one being seen through the character's eyes. That makes sense.
Right. The less of an avatar and more of a direct relationship with the game world.
Yep. You might as well just hand you some VR control. Like, if anything, RPGs should evolve into VR. That is the next evolution of RPGs, because that's more immersiveness of you being that character compared to holding a controller in your hands.
All right, so your definition, you would add a fifth element, which is the player has a direct relationship with the game world rather than a direct relationship with an avatar of the player?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Okay.
Right. Well, because you are the avatar, so like the avatar is not existent, basically.
All right, so by your definition then, though, Mass Effect is not an RPG.
It's a preference. I would say I wouldn't say that's a hard line. I'm just saying like that's an element that would make it. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna hold my own on that one. Yeah, I will say, like, even though games like I know Fallout, you can go into third person if you want to. It's really bad if you do it. It looks really wonky and horrible.
Right.
But then now I'm just killing my own argument, because I just think about it now, and the VAT system in Fallout puts you in a third person perspective. which then makes you view the character from the outside. So
you've created that character from scratch, pretty much.
That's true.
Like you can do.
Yeah.
I guess I would count Mass Effect 1 as an RPG, but after that I can't put.
It's the purest of all three.
I can't put the rest in there.
It's definitely the purest of all three. I don't discount the more action-heavy elements or the more action-focused and fluidity of 2 and 3. Mass Effect Andromeda, I'd say that's kind of stepped over the line into action RPG territory for me.
Okay.
What I would say is, what I would ask even is there such a thing as a pure RPG anymore?
Hold on. Well, I would ask you first, do you like my definition? Like, which definition do you like? Do you like mine or do you like Berkough's?
Well, of course I can't like yours, Mitch. You're my arch nemesis.
Nemesis.
I don't necessarily. I'd stick with the 4 that Matt plagiarized. Did you seek the person's permission before stealing this?
No, but we gave them full credit.
We gave them credit. You cited a source.
Yeah, I did disclose that. That's exactly where I got that from.
I don't necessarily think that for something to be a pure RPG, it has to be in a certain framing, because you could have it in 2D top down.
Well, I took that back. Just saying, I took it back.
Yeah.
So that argument is no longer valid.
Well, is it not the same definition then?
No, it's different.
What I like about the way that Axe of the Blood God has it is their 4 criteria is a good way to define all different types. So it could be an action RPG, because you're even if it's based on Twitch skills, eventually, like Diablo, you can get so overleveled that it really doesn't matter what your skill is to play the game. Your character is going to be so powerful, it's just going to kill all the enemies on the screen, right? Same thing with Elden Ring.
Stopped playing and deleted it by that point.
Right, but it's possible. It is
possible.
It is possible to get your character to that point where Twitch skills are irrelevant. And I think probably the same thing for Elden Ring. You can get your character, at least from what I've seen online, you can get your character so leveled and so you can understand how the systems work in such a way that you can manipulate it and not have to, worry about like dodge rolls and stuff.
But hold on, I'm going to stop you there. This is my issue, and this is why I don't like the definition by Blood Axe Raider. Did I quote him right?
No, Axe of the Blood God.
Axe of the Blood God. See, what kind of name?
It's from. Is it US Gamers?
Yeah. So
anyway.
Yeah, it was a US Gamer podcast. Then
Anyway, I'm not a fan of it. Here's why. Because even with your answer you just gave of like saying, "Oh, Diablo action RPG," and then you're talking about all these action elements in the game. I know we have JRPG, and I get it, and that one has just been there for so long. I'm willing to waive it. But like calling games action RPGs, I can't do that. We can't, because at its core, is it an RPG? And that's the thing. Games are co-op in action RPG for games that are at its core, an RPG are not an RPG. It's just saying we have RPG elements and we have main action in our game. And not saying that action. Hold on. I'm not saying the action is a main element in the action is not a key element that negates it from being an RPG. You can have action in an RPG. It's that, what is the core of your game? Is it all those elements of an RPG that just happens to have action in it? Like, we don't have to co-op and say action RPG. It's just an RPG. It has action in it, and that's fine. Like
Okay.
that's where I'm
two
frustrated.
examples in agreement with Mitch before I make a point. So you take the most recent Tomb Raider trilogy. They are third-person action games with RPG elements.
Right.
Marvel Spider-Man is a third-person superhero action game with RPG elements.
I say it's an
Right.
action.
Are they?
All of them are action adventure games. All of them are
With
action adventure.
RPG elements.
Who cares about the RPG elements? Don't sprinkle that in. Who cares if it has RPG elements? Is the core of the game an RPG? It is not. Just because in this is my issue, and I guess you're slightly agreeing with me, is
I am agreeing with you.
you are agreeing with me, which is like Diablo. You're saying it's an action RPG.
Write it in your diary.
Like you're telling me right now, like just because Fallout has action in it, why is Fallout not considered an action RPG? It should. They call it an RPG. Why is Skyrim not an RPG? Why is it not an action RPG? It's got action in it. Like it doesn't make sense. It's pointless crap.
What I was going to say is because people are people and people are normally inherently selfish and lazy. It's easier to describe something as a action RPG because people in terms of people who understand games as much as we do, you can understand those two things squashed together in the same way that people now understand Metroidvania, even though something might not be a pure Metroidvania game. If you say Metroidvania, it's kind of, oh, okay, I get what you mean. Whereas if you're trying to describe, imagine trying to read the review for Marvel Spider-Man. If someone said, this is a Spider-Man action adventure game that also includes leveling up, suit customization, building gadgets. And so it's easier just to say,
no, it's easier.
It is a Spider-Man action RPG.
No, it's easier to say Spider-Man, this is an action-adventure game that includes progression.
I was going to say, like, the Tomb Raider argument's kind of interesting. Because you could, I guess, fit Tomb Raider into all four of those.
Bye, Daisy.
Yeah, I know. She's sitting right there.
I want to be part of the podcast.
You probably could fit the Tomb Raider reboot into all four of those, or has all four of those elements, right? There is meaningful character progression, which you get experience from a variety of activities. Because there is character customization.
Yeah,
you can choose the different.
You can choose her skins. She has outfits.
Yeah, well, there's skins and there's different things that you can.
There's the leveling up.
Yeah, there's
different
abilities.
And all that kind of stuff.
There's a variety of lootable and craftable items.
There
right?
is.
You can skin the animals and craft shit. But where it fails, I think, though, is the last one. There's the emphasis on conflict resolution is not anything outside of Twitch skills. Like it's still based on your ability to.
I'm actually kind of, in terms of the purest form of RPG, I'm leaning towards Mitch's definition, which is that you start with a blank as canvas as you can.
Right.
So someone might have a mild backstory, but everything from that point on is your choice about how that character goes, where you would not have that in a more linear setting like Spider-Man or Tomb Raider.
Right.
Because whilst you can go off and do side quests and things like that, you are following that narrow path. Whereas something like Fallout or Mass Effect, for want of naming more, you do have the ability to influence how you go about getting to your conclusion,
doing the things,
or even multiple conclusions. Whereas in in Tomb Raider, there is only one conclusion. You fight at the end, and you win or you lose, and then if you lose, you replay the fight.
Yeah, and in some instances, like I get it. In the definition you have, Berkough, from the long-named thing that I don't remember off the top of my head, some fiery god of rage. I'm just gonna keep naming like really random things of like what I think it is, and I'm just gonna keep getting it wrong. It's just gonna be the gag this episode. Yes. So it does not technically fit the scheme of an RPG because it doesn't fulfill because it has to fulfill all four requirements. Correct?
Well, that's my understanding. Is that it needs
so that's
to be
why
able
they
to
co-op and say they can say action RPG because it has three of the four elements. But anyway, kind of going back a little bit to McWomble's point, I get the industry kind of just being like, we've said it for so long, now it's just co-opted as, JRPG. But I think it's actually more confusing to the player than it really to a person coming in to the games industry trying to understand what does this game do, by saying that this game's an action RPG. Because I think when you look at Spider-Man and then you compare something like Fallout, when you put those elements together and you say, this is an RPG, now this is Spider-Man, this is an action RPG, how many of those elements do you really think are so similar that it would make it very clear to you as the customer that Spider-Man is like Fallout except has action in it? I think it's really confusing.
Right. So in which case, is it how much is The Witcher an RPG? Because The Witcher already has that set.
That's that character.
It's an action. It's an action adventure game.
So that's one of the things that kind of turned me off, because I agree with you guys, like in terms of the blank canvas. I like character creation. I like to define who I am in the game world,
so
as much as possible.
I can't remember what game it was you were playing, but there was a little while ago. We said, "How far have you got in the game?" And he said, "I'm still building my character." And this is after about 2 days. I can't remember what game it was you were playing. It might have been your replay of Morrowind.
Yeah, same thing, right? Like, yeah, I could take an hour or 2 hours just doing the character creation. Yeah, so I mean that's one of the things that turned me off about Witcher, combined with the floaty combat. That's why I kind of bounced off of 3.
Yeah, the unresponsive. I can hit a guy 1,000 times, but somehow it's not feeling like I'm hitting him.
There's no feedback in that game.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad.
It is.
So I'd say that Cyberpunk 2077 is more of an RPG than The Witcher.
Cyberpunk is an RPG.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
It has player choice. It starts a character from scratch. You have actually multiple ways you can handle things, whether that is talking or not talking. Like that Cyberpunk 2077, for all the bugginess and how it's just an average game, it still is an actual RPG.
All right. So the Pixel Pints definition would include basically having the broadest possible, or the blankest canvas with the broadest possible options available. Like the more open it is, the more of an RPG it is.
I'll be right back.
All right.
Not necessarily, but maybe. Well, yeah. Get anything from create your own character all the way through to what you've got in Elden Ring and the Souls series, which is pick your avatar and here's the backstory.
Right.
But it's you who's making that selection rather than the game telling you are playing as this person with this backstory. It's you who's going through and action. So you're actually setting up that complete narrative for yourself.
Right.
So you complete the narrative journey. That's probably more, and it's more an expansion on number 4 of the Gore the God Killer definition. Comic book reference. Thanks, Matt. So it's not necessarily just about being able to have those encounters that don't rely on Twitch skills, but you being able to start and complete your own narrative story within the framework of the world. So it's not just you making decisions along a linear path. So do I go left or right? Do I smash a window or use a door?
Right.
It's actually more. It's more fundamental than that.
Do you have any experience with dungeon crawlers at all? Like where you build the entire party from scratch and then have to, go through a maze?
I played Darkest Dungeon a bit.
Okay.
So, would we describe the Darkest Dungeon? Is that an RPG?
I think so. I think it's yeah. I mean, it's definitely rooted in more of a tabletop type experience, but I would call it an RPG. Even though you're recruiting characters from a pool of randomly generated characters, you're still able to like name those characters, put your own gear and stuff on them.
Yeah, and you expand the world as you go.
Yeah.
And you do have choice around what it is you expand outside of the early stages where they say, no, you have to unlock this and you
Right.
have to unlock that.
Right.
Outside of that, I can't say I'm actually a big fan of dungeon crawlers. I find the repetitive nature of them to be somewhat annoying. Says the guy who plays Battle Royale games.
Yeah. I was just curious. I think because I still consider dungeon crawlers to be RPGs, in a way, at least tangentially related to the genre.
Are they an isometric action game?
I mean, I don't know. Like, where would you put something like Pillars of Eternity or Torment, stuff like that? Because that's still an RPG, and it's even though it's closer to a tabletop experience.
Well, I'd click on the icon and drag it to the recycling bin.
So not the type of game you would play.
I tried Diablo 3.
Okay.
I ended up the last 2 whole chapters of that I played with the sound off because I just did not care about the story. The voice acting wasn't particularly good. The story wasn't interesting at all, and the sound effects became egregiously egregious to my ears.
It does get pretty busy. The more you unlock, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know where I sit with that because if we were taking the pure definition, is this all semantics? Should we just say this is semantics and all go off on our separate ways?
Well,
sure. I mean, it can be.
Well, here's
Did you find another definition?
Well,
Mitch, I don't know whether you'll like this before you do your definition. So what I've added is so kind of like you were saying. You start with your ability to create a character. I've kind of expanded that to you have the ability to define the character and their narrative journey.
Yeah, I agree with that. Hands down, absolutely. Like you are crafting your own story. Truly crafting your own story, using the world around you to craft that story. Comparative to the story is set for you and you experience a story. Because if I go and play an RPG, I should be able to play that game 3 to 6 times and be able to have a very different experience on each of those playthroughs. And when I mean very, I don't mean just, I got different ability. I got a different type of ability here. It's like,
my suit is red now.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's I made certain choices I made completely changed the way I played the game because of a certain plot point changed or a certain quest that I did ended up changing the entire game for me. It's like that kind of stuff. No, I didn't find another. I looked up another one, but it was so generic that it was like you could fit into any category. So
okay,
I like our definition better.
So would we class
take
that as a fifth point?
Fifth point.
Would that be 0.5 on the scale, Matt?
what do you mean?
that we create our own narrative journey. We create our character with their own narrative journey.
We're not adding to the devil man rage fiery gods person's thingy. We are creating our own, and he must copy us. So he gives us. So he cites our source as us as a better source than whoever this man is.
Actually, the Blood God is 2 women, I think, who do that podcast. So if they ever picked up on this, that would be quite interesting.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, whoever these people are, these women, why don't we send it to them and we should send them this episode and say this is our definition. Beat that.
I don't know. I don't know if they would care.
Or maybe invite them on the show and then we can debate their. We
are far too small for them.
Yeah. For sure.
What are you talking about? We are bigger than. We are the only global gaming podcast that covers 2 great things, with great beer and video games. I don't think there's another podcast that has that.
I don't know if we're bigger than Jesus though. It's a Beatles reference.
Does Jesus have a brewery? What I don't know.
Just bring in Brewdog and then we got a Brewdog sponsorship, don't we?
Matt, when you first pitched it, I was kind of thinking, well, how do we talk about this? Because everything is seemingly blending now.
Well, yeah, so that was what I was thinking. Was like, you brought up Tomb Raider. I was thinking, immediately thought of Call of Duty and specifically Modern Warfare and the multiplayer. And I was like, those things are. That's like kind of everything has freaking RPG elements in it anymore. There's really no game that doesn't have some aspect of.
Well, I would push back a little bit and say I think games have always had RPG elements in them. They've always had them. It's that they are just. So like an example, when I go play Resident Evil 1 on the PlayStation 1, there is an RPG element in the game. I am progressing and adding new weapons to my character that makes me more powerful, that allows me to progress through the game. Like, that's every video game known to man. The RPG...
When I played Super Mario on the Game Boy, I picked up that fire flower, and I would shoot fireballs at Goombas.
Yeah, and like, so the RPG has not co-opted progression at all. I think that games have evolved faster to finding new ways to have the player progress, that they have taken some elements from some RPGs where progression is a huge component of that type of game, and they put them in it. And then all of a sudden they said, well, that's an RPG. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just progression. It's just basic progression in a game to make you better than when you started. Because if you have the same tools, and we had this example with Prince of Persia, the reboot, it would have been the reboot, so it'd be the second reboot, the cell-shaded one that came out in like 2005, 2006, whatever.
I think it was
2008.
Later than that, right?
2008.
Yeah, it was 360, I think.
Yeah, it was PS3 360. So 2008, when that came out, your character does not progress at all, except for one element, and that is for puzzle solving. Besides that, the prince does not get new abilities at all throughout the entire game, and it got ridiculed for that, which I understand. But because like your tool set was exactly the same you started, the combos you could do were the same as when you started the game. It's that you just got better at using the combos when you played further. But in the end, it still wasn't that good because the progression wasn't there. So like progression is not an RPG only thing. Progression has been in every video game.
Well, I was gonna say I think the definition works better the further back you go into video games in history. But I do think we hit a point specifically with that transition to HD where the genre lines just got extremely blurred.
Well, because we had the technology to do more.
Yeah.
Well, this is where my cynicism is going to kick in momentarily, which is the ability to do more isn't necessarily a good thing. So if you take the what Matt's mentioned about the progression in Call of Duty multiplayer to unlock new attachments, and then that transitioning over into Warzone, that created a artificial grind in order to keep player engagement. So the whole point about then taking something which is another kind of blurred line action / RPG game like Assassin's Creed Origins, and what was the Greek one?
The Greek one. What are you talking about?
Odyssey?
What was the Odyssey? Where
Odyssey, yes indeed. Odyssey, yes. I'm just sorry. That's what I think of when I think of Odyssey.
So taking both of those, they've artificially gated progression, and then made the game so lengthy and grindy that you have to buy XP boosters to make the grind less grindy. So it's almost as if developers have looked at elements of the pure definition of RPG that we've talked about and said, oh, we can take that and put it into this style of game, and then we can turn this style of game into something else, and we can make our game longer and increase our player engagement period.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the accountants got hold of it and said, your player engagement period is too short. So then they made it even more grindy, and then sold you things to relieve the grind.
Yeah.
Cynical.
Well, I will tell you one thing that is not, I would not consider an RPG element at all whatsoever, and that
microtransactions.
Is weapon degradation. Because it actually doesn't progress the player at all. It deprogresses the deprogress? What's the degress? Yeah, degresses, Evan, the character, because you lost the weapon that made them good in the first place.
So kind of interesting.
Legend of Zelda is not a 10.
No, well, weapon degradation is in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion.
Yeah, and guess what? It's not in Skyrim because because they learned their lesson. They said weapon degradation is not a real thing.
No, so it's interesting. All right, so the guy that helped design the systems for Morrowind and Oblivion, Ken Rolston, he left Bethesda shortly after Oblivion and went to go work for 338 Studios, which is the company that made Kingdoms of Amalur. So
that's unfortunate.
Right, and that game has weapon degradation, but Skyrim doesn't.
And guess what? Guess which one is known as like the best Elder Scrolls ever that sells so many copies? I bet it's the one that doesn't have weapon degradation.
It's probably the one thing that I enjoyed them getting rid of for sure.
What would we say is the Legend of Zelda Breath in the Wilderness? Is that an RPG?
No.
I would say it's an adventure game.
It's an action adventure game.
Yeah,
minus the fun action.
Yeah.
So it's tedious action with a fun adventure game.
There's no
conversations.
There's no experience points or anything either.
You don't start with a blank slate.
The
story starts you with a blank slate, but you do not customize nor create the story of your own character. The story is set.
Yeah.
That's why I don't consider even any of the Souls games. They're not RPGs. Anyone that tells me a Souls game is an RPG, it does not fit the definition.
You do create your character though.
But you do not form a story. You don't really form your own story though.
The way you're interacting with the world is not informing the narrative. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you just
no, because there's only one set narrative.
Yeah, there's a couple alternate endings based off like what you pick up, but that's not enough.
Okay.
And like, yes, are there a few moments where like you can make a decision about something, but it affects the game a little bit. Yes, but it's not dramatically affecting this entire playthrough. Like you could lose a person and not fight a certain boss. That's not really.
It's not like you're going to end up in. Do you have enough intelligence points to talk your way out of the fight with Father Gascoigne?
Yeah.
Right.
There you go. It's like the elements you put. Some of the elements you put into the character, you don't even know how to use or won't even use for an entire playthrough. Whereas like if you're playing an RPG, you use every element. Like that's why it's so important to put these points in certain areas, because and that's the other point is, and this is, I think all the Souls games, and I've played them, trust me, are not accessible because I don't know what I'm putting my points into. Where in like actual RPGs, you're putting your points into something because you notice it. I could go through an entire Souls game without noticing putting points into something and notice. So like I could not put points into something and completely miss what that is going to do to help my character. Whereas in an RPG, you feel it. You're like, you didn't put your points in intelligence? Well, this conversation turned bad because you didn't have the brains to handle this element, and it was clear to the player to say, you do not have this. Whereas in something like a Souls game, even when they give you those type of elements, they do not, they are not noticeable enough to go, oh, if I had this, I would have known that. Like, it's like, no, that's not happens in a Souls game. So they are not RPGs. They are action adventure games.
So I've got a question for you. Does Sony actually have any RPGs that we would fit into our definition that we've discussed?
They don't. I mean, not that I know of. But like, sorry,
because you can neither confirm nor deny.
Sorry, I should say this for anything that Sony has. Yeah, I cannot confirm or deny anything Sony has
available currently.
That is available currently in their library and what studios have worked on in the past or have been announced.
Has been officially announced.
No, they don't have. I don't recall them ever making an RPG. Like, what's their?
Because even something like Forspoken, which is going to be PlayStation exclusive, that's
just a timed exclusive.
Square Enix. Would I class Forspoken as an RPG? No. From our definition, probably not.
No,
that's an
action adventure game. Well, that's more
especially since the character is so well defined.
It's also actually more of a JRPG because it's made by a Japanese studio. But that's just because its own weird definition.
Making it for a more Western audience, which actually makes me think that I might play it and not just immediately hate all the dialogue and the voice acting.
The writing was written by Amy Hennig.
Yeah. So, second question then. Avowed. What do we think
that's an RPG.
The format of Avowed might take?
That's an RPG.
I mean, the rumor is that it's basically going to be Obsidian Skyrim, right?
And
that's the rumor. But
and just based on the clip that, like the teaser trailer, the player character in first person does like these rune symbols and things, and that is all in Tyranny. Well, Tyranny has the magic system is based on the same type of runes.
Well, and also look at their pedigree. Like they make RPGs. They are an RPG studio. Like, not saying that a studio can't shift, but this studio is like in its heyday right now. Like with the Outer Worlds being as big as it is, which I really enjoyed Outer Worlds, and I think if anyone had wanted to be introduced into an RPG, the Outer Worlds is a great game to be introduced into an RPG. I think it is very digestible as a new player. So I really highly recommend it to players that have never played an RPG before. That is one I extremely recommend you try as your first RPG if you want to get a good experience and one that is not overly complicated and explains things really well to the character, and you feel everything as you go through the game, and then start diving into like the Skyrims and stuff when you have a feel for if you're liking the RPG. But anyway, that's their pedigree. I don't see them not changing that. Why? Do you have a feeling, or are you just doing it to make us talk?
I'm just doing it to make you talk, but also I did find it interesting because I thought whilst we were on the topic, I'd pull up the Xbox Game Pass app.
All right.
Do they label it something?
The categories that they have for Game Pass are indie, family friendly, classic, shooters, sports, action adventure, platformers, and fighters and brawlers.
Why is there no RPGs?
Conspicuous, I was just about to say, conspicuous absence of RPGs in that list.
What is Fallout under? Like, click on the Fallout game and just see what it. Here, I have Game Pass right here. What am I talking about? I just opened it up, Game Pass.
Yeah, I'm just signing in right now to see if I can pull it up.
If it works. This app is ridiculous on PC.
I remember seeing the Outer
Worlds, the Outer Worlds, Mass Effect, both appear under shooter.
Interesting. Okay.
Fallout's probably shooter as well. Fallout 4 is no, it's a role playing. Is there role playing as a category?
Not on the app, there isn't.
Oh, well, there is a category for role playing. I just clicked on it. So they have, for role playing, they have Among Us, Fallout Shelter, Minecraft Dungeons, Ark, Hearts of Iron, Heartland, Final Fantasy 15.
So I do see an RPG category on my end.
That's interesting.
They've got a Plague Tale: Innocence.
That's Backbone. An RPG? Oh my god, that is not an RPG.
I don't think it is either. But it's, if you pull up the category RPG under
who works? Phil Spencer. What the heck are you doing? Do you not know video games? Because clearly he can't come out with any. Now he doesn't even know what an RPG is.
Dead Cells.
That's like the most action adventure game ever. That's more of an adventure game, for God's sakes, not even action.
I would say Dead Cells is a Metroidvania for sure, not really an RPG.
Oh my god, who is doing this categorizing? Jesus.
All three of the Fable games are on here, which I think is a plus.
Hey, I think I found a new. How is Mortal Kombat a role-playing game? What?
Is that what does that show up when you pull it up?
When I pull up role playing, Mortal Kombat 11.
Interesting.
Back 4 Blood is a role playing game. Football Manager is a role playing game. Halo Infinite is a role playing game. What the hell are you talking about? Oh my gosh. Honestly, next week we should just do a segment of making fun of Microsoft for how bad they do their topics.
Doing the cataloging at Microsoft?
Yeah,
it's got lost in
seriously
lost in random.
Big Phil. What the hell?
Because there's no category for RPGs on the Game Pass app. I just thought I'd search, and there are quite a lot on here that you would say yes, those are definitely role-playing games. But there's some on here that I just think, what the heck? Maneater
is what?
Yeah,
a shark game.
Is because they're what?
Is categorized as a role playing game.
Oh my god!
I suppose in the sense of you role play as a shark.
I mean,
you physically roll with the shark.
I mean, if anything, it's closer. It's actually it's more of just an action game. It's I mean, it's really hard on the RPG elements, but it's not an RPG.
They do have Greedfall listed, so they do
have Greedfall listed.
Okay, so here we go. Succeeded. So the Outer Worlds is labeled as action adventure role playing single player.
Okay.
So basically, they combine tags on these games. So like, it's more than one tag combinations. Sorry, Keith, go ahead.
So I'm still confused as to why there seems to be this differentiation and categorization. Try saying that 3 times faster. From the app, which I've got as a Xbox user, and you two is using the PC app, that they seem to have just thought that if you're playing it on a console, you don't actually care very much. It's seemingly that's the impression that I get from the fact that it's absent. Is it?
Okay,
that you
to its credit, Plague Tide Innocence is labeled action adventure role playing. They're just two separate tags. If you click on one tag, it gives you. That's so stupid. What is going on? Sorry, go ahead.
But I understand the Outer Worlds is you from a first person, and you can do a lot of shooting in it. But you can also talk your way through the entire game.
Can you?
I'm pretty sure you can. They said that you can do a pacifist run in it.
Well, all right. So you might be able to stealth your way through some of the combat, and not actually have to worry about it.
So I'm just confused as to why that's described as a first-person shooter and not.
Okay. To be fair, let's do this. I'm gonna go look at the PlayStation Store.
See what they have listed as RPGs.
See what they have listed as RPGs. I think
just
that's
Final Fantasy, Yakuza.
I would consider the Yakuza games RPGs, even though
they're action games.
I mean, I think it's only fair we do this. You know, hey, I'm the one that's saying this, fellas. I'm not the one. I could have walked away and just been like, let's not do this, but
the Yakuza franchise is an action franchise. It's not a role-playing. It's not a classic purist, and this is the purist RPG.
So the PlayStation Store, when you pull up role-playing games, the first two games that are listed, Elden Ring and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The third game is Bloodborne. The fourth game is Fallout 4, which I think is under what we would each consider to be an RPG. That's the first. Fallout 4 is probably the first game.
Check this out. When you would think Horizon Forbidden West, in the current mantra of video games, would be labeled as an action RPG, correct?
Well, Zero Dawn is on there.
Yeah, but if you look at Forbidden West, it is only an action game.
Open world action, yeah. Okay.
Not even open world. It's just action game.
Yeah, goddamn, makes me feel old. I went into the classic section in the Xbox app, and Mass Effect 3 is on there.
Nice.
Let's see. Let me look up more games. Let's go to.
I would say more of these that are listed on the PlayStation Store, I would consider RPGs than what Xbox and Microsoft have listed for sure.
Deathloop. Deathloop is naive. Deathloop, action game.
Yeah.
So to prove my point about the Yakuza franchise, and I just clicked on Fighters and Brawlers in the catalogue, and it's got Yakuza 6: The Song of Life.
Okay.
So it's a brawler. It's not an RPG.
Okay.
So there, Matt. Xbox has spoken.
Yeah, I would say these definitions from PlayStation are much better.
Yeah, they've got Persona 5.
Because, yeah, I guess I would say Elden Ring is a role-playing game. It's not an RPG. No. Sorry. No, it's not an RPG.
You're contradicting yourself.
I'm contradicting myself. Sorry. I was thinking of, what was it? I was thinking of something else when I was thinking about. Let's see. Let's look at.
All right, should we call it there, guys?
No. I gotta find one more. From the PlayStation Store. Let's see. We looked up a bunch. We gotta be fair. Name me a game. Oh, let's look at Mortal Kombat. Apples and oranges. Let's compare them. Apples to apples. Let's go.
See how they have it labeled.
How is it labeled? It is labeled fighting game. Wow. Wow. I think Microsoft should look into hiring whoever does the labels at Sony because, God, is Phil Spencer what is he doing all day? Is he just sitting in his office like, I want to buy that company. I want to buy that company.
He's counting his money.
I want to buy that company. He's counting his money that he's losing off Game Pass subscribers dropping the service because his games don't come out.
He doesn't need that money.
I know.
I think the main thing is he's counting his money whilst crying at the fact that he might get dropped as Singapore's favourite Essex-based podcast friend of the show.
Yeah, they did look quite disappointed when he dropped the ball again for the 100th time. And then, okay, well, let's end it this way of like, let's do one quick round of the news of the day of Phil Spencer had a shot at Spider-Man. He had a shot at Marvel, and he said no. Who says that? Who does that?
Phil wasn't in charge then.
Yes, he was. He was.
Yeah,
he was in charge.
Just come on.
He came on he was in 2 years.
I'm curious to know what the deal was that they tried to give Microsoft.
It was probably the same deal because they went to Microsoft first.
Well, maybe.
Crazy.
And maybe the split was not what they were expecting.
Who cares what the split is? You sell more copies. It's freaking Spider-Man. It's one of the biggest selling games on PlayStation because they sold 15 freaking million copies. Like,
you don't. There's no guarantee that you're gonna get Insomniac's Spider-Man. You could have gotten Superman 64. You know what I mean? Like it could have been a horrible fucking game.
I don't disagree, but the fact that just pass on it and they don't even give it a shot.
I don't know. We don't know what happened in those talks and what happened, behind closed doors.
I think that was that was his 7th strike.
I don't necessarily think that just taking a Marvel IP at the time when it was heating up hugely, if not already burning, is necessary. Just coming off the, I think if you catastrophize that scenario, so you've just come off the shittest presentation of Xbox, we have got some serious work to do. Right. Someone comes in and pitches you, we want you, or we would like you to make the game of the most popular comic book hero ever. And Phil's probably looking around thinking, I don't think we can do this without fucking it up.
Right.
Do we really need a major Marvel property screw up on our hands?
Well,
and then he's probably thinking, I can probably get away with doing a load of crap and not putting out any games in, say, 6 years' time. But if I screw up one Marvel property, am I going to get fired? Or am I just going to get a few people on podcast to bitch at me when the story comes out?
He's not the only. We're not the only few, but
yeah, I know.
Right.
Well, and to be fair, it was not. That was for Spider-Man. It was just for the Marvel license to do a Marvel character. It was under my understanding. Like the negotiation could be any Marvel character. They were shopping specifically Spider-Man, but the negotiation involved any Marvel character with the Marvel license. The fact that I get it, and I get the fact of like, yeah, they may have not been in a place of strength to be able to say to do it, but the response that they gave was, we're fine with the lineup we have, which was Gears,
you've got to say that,
Forza, and Halo. That's all you have. You can still... I think people would have been... And again, I'm all for Microsoft doing great because I want to play great games. That's all I want to do, right?
Right.
And how can PlayStation see Insomniac and say, do Spider-Man for us when they just got done doing an Xbox game that's similar? How does Xbox not see that and go, hey, Insomniac, and thanks for doing this game. What do you think about Spider-Man?
I don't know. Sunset Overdrive is not that compelling.
It may not be that compelling, but you know the pepedigree. The one thing that game had good, it
didn't really do well commercially.
I get that, and but there's a difference between a new IP and Spider-Man, right? And the other element with that too is, yes, I agree with you. The game is not great. But I think one thing that the game does stand out with is its traversal. And what is Spider-Man? Traversal.
Yeah.
So like if that's the best thing that they have, Microsoft could have supported them to bring in the other elements, just like Sony did when they brought in Spider-Man. I just think yes, could you have a major fuck up on your hands? Absolutely. That's any risk you take in this industry. Any game you put out there is a risk of epic failure because these projects are big, they're massive, there's a lot of people working on them, and things can go wrong. It happens. But if you do not take the risk at all, you are not going to do anything. And this is what Microsoft has just proven to themselves, which is they have not taken any risk. Now they did, and we're waiting for the fruits of their labor to appear, hopefully soon, but we're still waiting for it. But the fact that they're not taking any risk at all, I mean, it showed their commitment to really bringing games to their platform.
Right.
Like, if you have the Spider-Man license, you could shop it anywhere. You don't have to have an internal studio. Like, heck, Sony did it with an external partner at the time. Insomniac was not a part of PlayStation. Yes, did they have a prior relationship, but so did Microsoft. So it didn't matter if they didn't have a studio. You just need to find the right partner. And Microsoft could have found the right partner. And it's more the hindsight of seeing you have one of the biggest properties in the world that no matter what, even if the game bombed, it probably would have sold enough copies to do pretty well because it still has the Spider-Man name on it, right? Like, even if it was average, and they could still improve on it and work on it and make it better. Microsoft had the tools to do it. The fact they passed on it, I think, is just extremely bigot-headedness and not farsightedness enough. I don't know. Again, I don't know all the crux of the deal, but coming from what I'm seeing here in front of me, from what Microsoft has done the last 5 years since that time that they could have seen the property, it was actually longer. I think it was like 8 years ago they were given the opportunity. How you did not try is behoved of me, but that's just me.
I don't even know if behoved is a word, but
it's
I
not.
like it.
It's my.
So I think it's, in terms of, we don't know what was going on. We don't know what the corporate appetite was for that at the time. I'm guessing that after the bomb that was the Xbox One, and as much as we could say Phil was in charge, is that we don't know. He didn't have the sense of the strength in his own autonomy that he's got now, which I feel like we could criticize him for things that are happening now more so than 2 years into taking over from the shit show that was
Don Matrick.
The thing that I find more disturbing about the games industry news at the moment is EA trying to sell a merger to people
where they're still in charge.
With Andrew Wilson saying, "Oh yeah, I want to be your boss. Can we merge? But can I still be boss?"
Yeah, I'm the one looking to merge.
Yeah,
because we're not doing so hot. But make me in charge because I'm good at making us do not so hot. I mean, it's kind of like Microsoft right now, but that's just it.
I don't know if he's had a malfunction in his positronic brain network that's making him think like this.
Well, he's just really enjoying that CEO paycheck.
But he can still get that, and he can. I don't know if he's worried about future earnings and then not being able
ask for the golden parachute, for God's sakes.
Yeah, that bemuses me more than any decision that Microsoft may turning down a Marvel property. So why would you rock up to Microsoft, or who else did they try and hawk? Who else did Andrew Wilson try and hawk himself to more than anything else? Because he's trying to sell himself rather than sell himself and the company.
He didn't go to Microsoft. He went to NBC, NBC Universal. That's where he went.
Was it Comcast?
He went to Comcast. He went to Facebook, and he went to Google. He did not go to Microsoft. If I remember the report correctly. Oh no, he should have never went, because if you're Microsoft, that's a deal you almost don't want to take. Because what properties do you have that's worth it? Like you're going to absorb another RPG studio in Bethesda. I mean, not Bethesda. I'm sorry. BioWare. The bees are bugging me. And then you're going to absorb. Okay, so yeah, you'll absorb another first-person shooter. That apparently Halo is your greatest one, so don't want to absorb another competitor. And then on top of that, you're going to absorb sports games, where now I don't know the reasoning behind PlayStation having to going with the show going multi-platform. I don't know if that's an internal thing or if that was a license thing, but you know that if you're going to want the license of the NFL, they are going to tell them that, hey, either you put this all multi-platform or we're not going to let you have the license. And then if it affects a lot of things, because EA is a licensed company. It's a lot of licenses.
The reason that I say go to Microsoft is why do you not feel that you would get, and the answers in the previous statement, which is Andrew Wilson hawking himself as well as the company. So he's not going to go to Microsoft because he knows Phil Spencer's in charge. He's not going to go to Sony because he knows Jim Ryan's in charge. He's trying to find a way to shoehorn himself into a new role
and Phil Spencer's
going to with him.
Phil Spencer's going to give up his role as head of Xbox? I don't think so.
Of course he's not.
Because he's done such a great job. He thinks he's man of the year.
I'd rather have Phil Spencer in charge than Andrew Wilson.
I mean,
I would too. You guys don't think that they knew that the FIFA license was running out, and this is just a way to.
Well, the thing is, I think they would
avoid the ship sinking.
I think to be honest, they would have had to disclose that when they were talking with the merger before they would get purchased. It's probably why nobody's picked them up. Exactly, because they're like, you lost the FIFA license. That's one of the biggest. That's one of your biggest juggernauts, especially because of the microtransactions, bringing in billions of dollars a year just in microtransactions.
Well, yeah, that in the mobile games for sure.
Right.
Well, the worry that as much as I dislike how Andrew Wilson conducts himself, and probably him as an individual, if from what we've seen of his corporate mentality, would he take himself out to the hole in the car park at the back of EA Studios and bury himself with all of the other dead developers that they've killed off over the years? Probably not. But
no, he probably has a monastery of how many he killed off just as a show of pride.
Just little statues of them.
Yeah. He's being like, yeah, they were a great studio, but they didn't make money. Sayonara.
Tiny little incense burner next to them.
Well, no, he has little statues, and then he has a little like Nerf gun. He shoots down the statues, being like, I took them out.
The FIFA license thing is somewhat outside of EA's control because EA aren't big enough to afford what FIFA were asking.
Well, yeah,
they wanted billions.
Oh yeah,
and
I think what FIFA was asking was ridiculous anyway. But
not really. I mean, if they're going to, which I think we all can agree that we all disagree of how FIFA handles the microtransaction thing, but if the money's there and it's because of the license that the money is there, then
we don't know if it's the license that's generating the revenue or the so. And this is the thing. So FIFA's taken on their own risk now, and EA has decided to try and deal with their own potential risk of losing the license or giving up the license even. So last year, the revenues just from microtransactions in FIFA Ultimate Team, $1.62 billion.
I get that, but I think in my mind, like an example would be, I would not play a Madden game if it did not have the NFL license. If I can't play as the Chicago Bears, I will not be buying that game.
You don't want to play as the Chicago Boars?
I tried one of those games before, and it's not the same. Because almost as if, and going back to the topic that we had, which is an RPG, these sports games are very similar to an RPG. Very similar. They're not an RPG. But because I can play as the character, I would actually because I can play as the character through their eyes, almost in a sense, and be them.
Mitch creates himself playing quarterback for the Chicago Bulls.
I've done that before. I mean, I played quarterback for Chicago Bears. But yeah, I will tell you now, if there is no NFL license on a Madden game, I'm not going to buy the game. I'm going wherever the license will go. So, it will be interesting to see how it affects the game.
Well, it'll be interesting to see as well how FIFA manage it themselves, because there's two elements to this. One is that they can just
license it out to someone else.
Let the license be free and do the thing that I think that they will do, and just cash in on loads of horrible microtransaction filled mobile games to try and get a share of that $45 billion dollar Chinese market. At the same time, they may look to engage a studio and make their own FIFA football game that's full of microtransactions. Where is the studio that's got the same pedigree?
2K?
And because
yeah, I think
would 2K want to pay what FIFA are asking?
Well, here's the
Probably
thing.
not,
I think where this will actually go for FIFA is because FIFA is going to ask for so much money. Like obviously, if this own studio thing doesn't work and it's not successful,
it's going to fall flat on its face. They do not know how to run a fucking World Cup football championship, let alone a development studio.
Okay, well, if it doesn't work out, this is where I see the path of the FIFA license going. I see that they shop it around, no one buys it because they're asking too much, and I see FIFA going, okay, we'll put it out there that you can purchase it, but we're not doing an exclusive. It will be free for people to purchase, to use, so that maybe EA will come back to the table, but then 2K will come to the table, and there will be two competing football licensed games.
So you're saying it's going to be like the NBA?
Yeah. I think it will be very similar, and I think that's something similar that maybe the NFL might go to as well.
Yeah, I can see FIFA wanting to do,
and then we'll get better games.
Will we?
Yeah.
It would mean that the license overall is going to be cheaper, right? Because if you've got multiple,
but overall you're
companies,
making more.
Right, if you have multiple companies that are all licensing the rights to that particular thing, then you're going to make more money overall. So it could be cheaper for EA and 2K.
And to answer your question,
but they each get a shot at making a good game.
Yeah, to answer your question, Keith, yes, it will lead to better games. The time of when people said the football games were the best was when 2K was competing with Madden, and 2K was the better game. And what changed that? EA bought the license, exclusive license to Madden, and now Madden is okay in small incremental growth. But really, when 2K was competing with EA on the Madden franchise, it literally was the best football games we got at that time.
You and this might be because you're not football fans. You're looking at it from one side of the coin, and the flip side is FIFA being a greedy, corrupt bastard of an organization. So whilst I do understand the point that having two competing rights holders making two competing games may create a better game, potentially going back to how it was, but FIFA aren't necessarily interested in making a better game. They are interested in the game of making as much money as humanly possible. So that it may come down to someone saying, well, we want two games with a 30-70% revenue share, 30 FIFA, 70 developer, but in that we want a guaranteed $1 billion return annually.
Yeah.
And make it happen. Whereas they know that they can get some of that by making the horrible mobile games filled with microtransactions, but it's got all of the players in it. Great. Why do we need this? Why do we need to create a development studio to make a football game that can compete with whatever EA Soccer League might put out.
Because I think I also believe that the revenue is based off, and again, I don't know football. I don't know the FIFA, the company or whatever, the league. But I would also
FIFA is the overall governing body for all of football globally.
Gotcha. So I don't understand FIFA as much. So, but I also would see that the fan base is exuberant and very loyal to their clubs, similar to football, in America. And I would think if all of a sudden they stopped making a AAA football game, FIFA game of some kind, the fans would rage and be so uproared that I think FIFA has no choice.
I don't think you understand how out of touch these people are with reality.
But it will affect their bottom line, and they won't like that.
Yeah, but it'll take some time before.
I'm just saying eventually. I'm not saying it's instant, but I think it will affect their bottom line to the point they will change their mind. Like, it will be torture for multiple years not having a AAA FIFA game if they don't find a partner or if they don't make it themselves. But they are going to be frustrated. And then they're going
to be looking at the success next year, because they won't have time to make the equivalent of FIFA 24. They don't have there's no way that they can build up a studio and pump out a game for.
No, I get you. They'll be skipping years.
They could. It would be crap.
Yeah, they're gonna see. They're gonna see Football Club, and they're gonna see what kind of revenue they're bringing in, and then they're gonna see. We really should focus on AAA development, because look at the money they're making still.
Yeah, well, they are the type of organization that want to not just eat their cake; they want to eat everyone's cake and have it too.
I know. I know. I saw a last week tonight with John Oliver covering FIFA, and I totally understand how greedy and how inappropriate and how corrupt the FIFA organization is in general. Like, I don't doubt it, but I do think in the end they will see reason. It's just not instant like we would want it to be.
I don't think they've actually realised how much effort it takes to create a game, even of the incremental quality that FIFA's become. And they've just looked at the numbers and thought, we're not earning enough here.
Yep.
So let's if they're going to hand us back the license, what can we do it ourselves? Yeah, we're FIFA. Of course we can do it ourselves. We can do anything. We can give the last two World Cups. No, the last one in Russia and this one in Qatar, to two of the most corrupt countries, criminal breaking countries in the world. Of course we can do whatever we want. And then the flip side of that is, how do we fund this studio that we've got? Because we don't want to spend our own money, because we hoard all of that ourselves. Well, we can palm off the license to a load of mobile app developers and get them to rake in loads of money from microtransactions on apps. And then we can use that to fund whatever we want to do here to compete with whatever EA do. I think that's the way it's going to go. And if it gets to the point where they're making so much money from just mobile, they just won't even bother. They won't even bother competing, because they'll just be happy with all that money coming in, that they don't want to spend the money that it would take to build the studio up.
The part I disagree with you is that, yes, they may say, I'm not going to bother making it my own AAA game, but they will put the license on a AAA game then, if that's not going to happen, because that is marketing. That is the marketing that they want. That is an exposure they get in a game all year round. Like, no matter what, I
can see them going back to EA and saying, do you want to end up in a revenue sharing agreement, rather than we just spent 50 or 25 million on trying to set up our own competitor that didn't work out. We'll go back to the table with you, or like you guys said, put it out there for EA and 2K, or whomsoever else. Mm-hmm. But it will come with a stipulation that we want a guaranteed minimum annual revenue of X,
or adjusting it, where it's like a little higher percentage or something.
Well, I think it'll probably be both. It'll probably be like what you're saying, because they did go back to EA and say we want $1 billion, right? Basically, that
Yeah,
was
a year.
the right. So I think they'll do all right. It's going to be 500 million, but it's non-exclusive.
Yeah.
And then if they get a 2K and EA both buying that license, then they've covered.
Yeah, I think we're just saying in the end, there will be an EA license. There will be a FIFA licensed AAA game one way or another. It just may not happen sooner than later, but eventually they will come. It will come back.
I think
But it
so.
will come to you via Viacom
some
with
capacity.
Andrew Wilson as CEO.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah. Before we go, wake me up. Before we go, I do want to just say, and I think I can speak for all of us in saying, like, here in America we had a very tragic thing where 19 kids, if I remember the numbers correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Berkough, but I believe it was 19 kids were murdered.
19 was the number I heard. Yeah.
Okay, 19 kids. I know it's two
teachers.
teachers as well were murdered due to gun violence. And I think we all can agree that, the current gun laws in America are not what they should be. And we have different opinions on how that should work, but I think we all agree that the current status is not okay. And we highly encourage that you look into and basically things need to change because this shouldn't happen.
Write to your congressman, write to your senators, because how it stands at the moment is every day you live in America and go out to work or go out to do something, you live with the risk that you or your loved ones might die in a mass shooting for no reason. And if that's the price of freedom that you're willing to pay, good for you, but it wouldn't be a choice that I would like to make for myself or my family.
And as one that is an American that lives in this country, I would agree with that 100%. So, but on that note, unfortunately,
I still want to know what crickets taste like.
I'm sure you can find some somewhere. I think that there's what else have I eaten? Ants, candied scorpion, candied scorpion.
It's interesting.
Only tiny. It just tasted sweet and then crunchy.
Right.
But
I imagine they don't taste like anything. They're just a flavor.